Shalom, peace and blessings. Welcome, welcome to the Fourth Angels Learning Center. And today we're going to be doing basically, we're going to be looking at a video of an explanation pertaining to the keeping of the feast, pertaining of the law of Yah and the idea that there's some type of difference between the phrases law of Yah and the law of Moses. So what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the explanation that's given by some of these brothers. Now, I just want to make a disclaimer. There's no emphasis on the character of these brothers. I'm basically going to listen to what they're saying, and I'm going to address some of the wrong concepts that they have in their teachings. I've had conversations with these brothers and somewhat of a debate with these brothers. So there's no animosity or anything like that. Just wanted to make sure that there was more of a balanced view of what they're talking about. So I'm going to pull up their video now and allow them to explain and kind of stop it during certain points so that way we can see the whole context of the verses that they're using. Okay. So let's look at this. Let me pull up this video. All right. So let's listen to what these brothers express in regards to what they're about to say about the law of Yah and the law of Moses.
So let me show you guys that there is a distinction between the law of Moses and the law of God. Man, there was a verse that Jesus said, in your law is it not written this? Like even Jesus was like, look, in your law is written this. But let me show you this.
So I'm not sure what that emphasis was about with the Messiah saying in your law. This comes from the book of John, chapter 10. And when he says in your law, he was actually quoting from the book of Psalms. So not sure how that helps the argument, but just mentioning it because he mentioned it. So I just want to clarify the incorrections that's inside this explanation. But go ahead.
Deuteronomy 4:13. It says, and he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even the 10 commandments, and he wrote them on tables of stone. So it should be no surprise that God wrote the 10 commandments on a tables of stone. But look at this. There was
All right. So praise Yah. I could see the verses that he's using right here. So if you look at the context, Deuteronomy chapter 4, looking at verse 12, 13, and 14, you can clearly see that there's no isolation. There's no isolation of the Ten Commandments away from the rest of the commands and the rest of the statutes and judgments. Look at what it says in verse 12. It says, Yah spake unto you out of the midst of the fire, and you heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude, only you heard a voice. And he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments, and he wrote them upon tables of stone. And yahuah commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments that you might do them in the land where you go to possess it. So he not only told them 10 commandments, that's the only thing they heard from the mountain with their own ears. If you go back to Exodus 20, you'll see clearly why those were the only words he heard. But in verse 14, it says that Yah still commanded more things. You see, he declared the 10 commandments from the mountain, but he commanded more from verse 14. And he referred to them as statutes and judgments. But he's going to gloss over this and he's going to go to another place that we're going to examine as well. So this does not show any separation between the 10 commandments and the statutes and judgments located in the rest of the law that's found in the books of Moses. Let's continue.
was another set of commandments which the Bible calls the law of Moses. Deuteronomy 31. And I'll just read some verses here. I'll start with verse 9, for example. It says this, and Moses wrote this law and delivered it unto the priests of the sons of Levi which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and unto all the elders of Israel. You can fast forward. He said some things, very lovely things. And it says, and it came to pass when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in the book until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant, saying, take this book of the law and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against you. God's law, the Ten Commandments, was placed inside the ark. The law of Moses was placed on the outside, on the side of the ark. Let me show you something else. Deuteronomy.
So one of the things that many people do is they kind of skim and they fast forward as they steer you to see what they're saying that's not really there. So the Ten Commandments being in the inside the ark, it does not bring an emphasis on a separation of a law. Here's why. I'm going to go to Deuteronomy 31, and we're going to look at the verses that he brought out. And we're going to look at verses that he did not bring out as well. So let's go to Deuteronomy 31. Okay, Deuteronomy 31. And there's such a blessing that comes with slowing down. Slow down and take a look at what is actually being delivered. So when you look at this, right, he said, and Moses wrote this law, and delivered it to the priests of the sons of Levi, which bear the ark of the covenant, unto all the elders of Israel. So it's interesting how he says this law. And we're going to see what this law is, because the reiteration of what was in Exodus was reiterated in Deuteronomy. But let's read a couple of things just to get a little context. It says, Moses commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of release, in the Feast of Tabernacles, it says, when all the Israel is come to appear before Yah, that your Elohim, in the place which he shall choose, you shall read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Now, what's happening here? Yah's people, this is Deuteronomy 31, they're about to go into the promised land. This is literally the end of a 40-year punishment that they had in the wilderness, and now they are going into the land of Israel. So he is reiterating all of the things that they must do. It says here, gather the people together, the men and women, the children, your stranger that is within your gates, that they may hear and that they may learn and fear Yah, your Elohim, and observe to do all the words of this law, that their children, which have not known anything, may hear, learn to fear Yah, your Elohim, as long as they live in the land where they go to possess it. Right? Let me show you what they wrote before we go down to where he went. Let's see what he's referring to this law. Deuteronomy, starting at verse 5. 10 commandments. It says here in verse 1, Moses called all Israel and said to them, hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that you may learn them and keep and do them. And how does he begin? The statutes and judgments. Yah, your Elohim, made a covenant with us in Horeb. Yah made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all of us alive here. Why? Because the fathers died in the wilderness. It says, Yah talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. I stood between Yah and you at that time to show you the words of Yah. For you were afraid by reason of the fire, and you did not go up into the mountain. I am Yah, your Elohim, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Right? And he starts to reiterate the words that came out of the mountain, which was the 10 commandments. Now, he mentioned why 10 commandments were the only words. He says, I stood between Yah and you at that time to show you the word of Yah, because you were afraid by reason of the fire and you did not go up the mountain. This is why you only heard 10 commands. But let's continue. He breaks down the 10 commands and then says this in verse 22. after the 10th command. It says, these words Yah spoke to you unto all your assembly in the mount, out of the midst of the fire, out of the cloud, out of the thick darkness, the great voice. And he added no more, and he wrote them in 2 tables of stone, and he delivered them to me. Again, why? Because they did not want to hear anymore. It came to pass that when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, for the mountain did burn with fire, that you came near to me and all the heads of your tribes. So this is what happened. They came to Moses after hearing the 10 commandments and said, behold, Yah your Elohim have showed us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that Elohim does talk with man, and he lives. Now, therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of Yah our Elohim anymore, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh that have heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as we have, and lived? Then they tell Moses, go thou near and hear all that Yah our Elohim shall say, and speak unto us all that Yah our Elohim shall speak unto you, and we will hear it, and we will do it. You know why this is not good? Because they were afraid. They moved away from the voice of Yah. So what does he say? Yah heard the voice of the words that you spake unto me, and Yah said to me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken unto you. They have well said all that they have spoken, but oh, that there was a heart in them, that they would fear me and keep my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with the children forever. So he's talking about the 10 commandments as well as the other commandments. He's saying that they don't have a heart to even keep the 10. They don't have a heart to even keep the 10. So he says, go say to them, get you in your tents again. But as for you, as for Moses, right? So listen to what's going on. He's telling their people is telling Moses that they don't want to hear anymore. So he tells them, you don't have a heart to fear me or keep my commandments. He tells them, go back to your tents. But he tells Moses, you stay here, and I will speak to you all the commandments and statutes and judgments, which you shall teach them, that they may do them in the land that I give to possess them. And then it says, you shall observe and to do therefore, right? As Yah your Elohim have commanded you, and you shall not turn aside right or to the left. And then it says this, you shall in all your ways which Yah your Elohim have commanded you. Yah has commanded you that you may live, that it may be well with you, that you may prolong your days. Now, is this against them or is this for them? Is this to prolong their days, that it may be well with them? Is this law, statutes, commandments against them, or is it for them? You're going to see where the misunderstanding comes in. So this whole law that Moses is writing, he's not writing because it's Moses' law. It is still Yah's commands. This is what it says. This is what it says. Let's go back up. Verse 31. Yah said, I will speak to you all the commandments, statutes, and judgments. I will speak these things to you, which you shall teach to them. Why? Because they did not want to hear. Because they didn't want to hear, Yah sent them to their tents. It does not mean that there's a separation of the law or that the laws do not connect. How does it say, honor your mother and father, and then the statutes and judgment says, don't curse your father and mother? Is that separate from that command in the 10 commandments? No. It's an elaboration on the same 10 commandments. So he says that these things is so they can live, so it could be well with them, and so that it can prolong their days in the land. This is the laws, the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments that Moses wrote, by the way. Let's go back to verse 31. Because now that we understand what this law is, it's the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments of Yah that Yah told them. He told them, take the book that I wrote and give it to the people. Now, he does skim over these things and just say there's a lot of beautiful things. It even says, things about blessings and, the commission of the priests and what they should do. Um, and then we get down here and this emphasis here. Okay. It says right here, and it came to pass that when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book, that until they were finished, the Moses commanded the Levites which bear the ark of the covenant, saying, take the book of the ark and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of Yah your Elohim. Does that mean that it's not Yah's law? It's Moses' law? No. It just means that it's on the side of an ark. It's a book. It's not tables of stone. It's two different things. Are the 10 Commandments in this book of the law? Absolutely. We read it in chapter 5 of Deuteronomy. It's in chapter 5 of Deuteronomy. It's also in Exodus 20. So what's going on here? So he says that it may be a witness against you. But didn't he say in Deuteronomy 5 that it was supposed to be something to observe, that it may be that they may live, that it may be well with them, that they may prolong their days in the land which they go to possess? How is that against them? Well, let's see. So Deuteronomy 31, it mentions that it may be against them, a witness against them. And then in verse 27, he gives you why. Because I know your rebellion. It's not against you if you don't rebel. It's against you if you rebel. Even the 10 Commandments. It says that you're stiff-necked. Behold, while I am yet alive with you today, this day, you have been rebellious against Yahuwah. How much more after my death? This is why it's going to be a witness against them. No other reason. Because if you're going to say that the 10 Commandments is also a witness against you when you go against it. Matter of fact, let's see it. Deuteronomy 5. It talks about the Sabbath day. Exodus chapter 34 also reiterates the table, what was on the tables of stone, right? Look at what he wrote. Look at what it says is cut into the two tables of stone, right? He's reiterating the 10 Commandments. You shall destroy their altars, break their images, their groves. You shall worship no other Elohim, for Yah, whose name is a jealous Elohim, right? These are the 10 Commandments. No molten Elohims, right? No molten gods. He also mentions the feasts right here. Now remember, this is the tables of stone, the covenant renewed. Then he talks about the Sabbath here. 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. In the earing time and in the harvest you shall rest. So he's talking about all the rest days, the Sabbath and the feast days. The earing time is the spring feast. The harvest time is the fall feast. So the Sabbath, the earing time, and the harvest time, he was talking about the Sabbath day as well as the Sabbath, the feast days. So what happened? How did the 10 Commandments go against them? How is the 10 Commandments against someone, right? Since we focus a lot on the law of Moses being against them, can the 10 Commandments be against someone? Well, let's see. Exodus chapter 16. Something very, very drastic happened when Yah was giving the people the Sabbath day. And it says here in verse 25, Moses said to them, eat Eat that today, for today is the Sabbath unto Yah. Today you shall not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. And it came to pass that there went out some people on the seventh day to gather, and they found none. And Yah said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? And he reiterates this, and he told them to rest. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. So I think everybody knows the story, because usually when you keep the Shabbat, there's this emphasis that if whenever you tell somebody that you're keeping the Shabbat, they kind of throw in your face that you need to stone someone for keeping the Shabbat. And the reason why they say that is because what was mentioned in scripture. There was a scenario of someone picking up sticks on the Shabbat. And let me see if I could find that. Okay. And then I want everybody to kind of think clearly against them. And is it against somebody who keeps it or against somebody who rebels against it? So it says, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on a Sabbath day. They found him gathering sticks and brought him unto Moses and Aaron and unto all the congregation. And they put him inward because it was not declared what should be done of him. And Yah said to Moses that the man should surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. Very important to see, because we see that there was a death penalty against those who rebelled against the law. This is how the law works. The law is a revelation of sin. It reveals what sin is. If the law no longer exists or is no longer valid, sin will be erased from existing. And this is what Yah is not doing with his law. He is not erasing a law, because the law defines sin. Not only does the law define sin, but it requires an ordinance, which is death. An ordinance is a requirement. You can say it's a law, you can say it's an instruction, but when you say an ordinance was given, it means that a requirement was given for you to do something. So if it says the book of the law, that is a witness against them, because I know your rebellion, that while I am still alive with you this day, that you have been rebellious against Yah. How much more after their death? Numbers 15 was showing the rebellion that they had against Yah about the Sabbath, meaning that the Sabbath witnessed against them in that judgment, because he broke that commandment. So let's go back to this conversation and see the conclusion, the false conclusion that comes up.
Deuteronomy 4:14. It says this. It says, and the Lord commanded me, this is Moses talking, and the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, that you might do them in the land you go over to possess. I'll show you 2 Kings 21 verse 8. 2 Kings 21 verse 8. It gets a little clearer each verse I show. It says, neither will I make the feet of Israel move any more out of the land which I gave their fathers. This is God talking. Only if they will observe to do according to all I have commanded them. God is saying, if they do all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them. So we can see here that there was something that God commanded them, and there was something that Moses commanded them.
Again, the emphasis that Moses was commanding them to do something is not Moses commanding them. We saw that everything that Moses told them was only because the people did not want to hear it anymore. we saw that he sent them to their tents in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And that the only reason why the law was taught to them by Moses is because Moses is the only one that heard the rest of the commandments come from Yah. Not because Yah commanded them something and then someone else was commanding them. No, it was still Yah commanding them statutes and judgments. But it was Moses that had to teach them it because they did not want to listen.
And that was the statutes and the judgments. Last verse I'm going to share with you on that point. Daniel 9:11 says this. Yeah, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore, the curses poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. So what Daniel understood was there was God's law, and there was something written in the law of Moses.
Look at what it says, guys. It says, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey your voice. Therefore, the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of Elohim, because we have sinned against him. So, because, and this is very clear, but because of the emphasis on the distinction, there's a little distortion in the reading of this verse. The law that's transgressed, the voice that's not obeyed, is what's leading them to receive the curse that is written in the law of Moses. So if they're two different laws, why would you receive a curse from the law of Moses for breaking the law of Yah? The law of Yah is the law of Moses. It's the same thing, interchangeable. But what's happening is, to perpetuate this idea that they are separate, he is reading statements that say your law and law of Moses as if they're talking about two different things. Let's look at it again. Verse 11, all Israel have transgressed your law, even by departing, that they might not obey your voice. Therefore, the curse is poured upon us. Where's the curse located? The curse is located in the law of Moses. Why would the curse in the law of Moses apply to the breaking of the 10 commandments if they're not the same law? If you break the same law, you get the same curse or ordinance. See, these are the ordinances written in the law of Moses, which is that the wages of sin is death. Even Paul talks about this.
So when we talk about what Jesus did away with, and we're going back to that verse in was it Ephesians chapter 2 verse 15, we could touch on that right now if you like. I'm going to go to Galatians chapter 5 so you can see that how all of these things are connected.
We're gonna touch on those.
But let me go to yeah, they're all connected. Let's go to Galatians so that we can see that major issue in Acts 15 was about circumcision. And people.
So he's saying it was about circumcision, but there's an emphasis on the law, the entire writing of the law of Moses, instead of the actual issue in Acts chapter 15 verse 1, which is that they had to be circumcised to be saved. The issue wasn't that they had to be circumcised, but that they had to be circumcised to be saved. That's what the issue that they were arguing about. Not only that they had to be circumcised, but they had to keep all the law to be saved, is contrary to the whole situation of the gospel. The situation of the gospel is that you are dead in sin and that you need saving. So it's a contrast to need saving and that you can keep your own commandments, or you can change up your own situation by yourself. By keeping the law, you can be saved. This is what was contrasting the gospel that Peter and Paul was teaching, is that you had to be saved by faith through Yahushua first in order to be enabled to keep something that you were unable to keep by yourself. This is the message.
are just constantly mixing these things up. It's not all the same. One is the law of Moses and one is the law of God. This is Galatians chapter 5. And actually, we learned about this past week on Saturday. And I learned a lot, actually. There's some brothers in the chat. Taylor is one of my guys. And, of course, Edwin Cotto. We talked about this. So I learned a lot from them. But this is what it says. Galatians 5, verse 1. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the... Remember that word I asked you to hold on to in Acts 15?
Yoke.
With the yoke. What was the yoke? Behold, I, Paul, say unto you that if you be circumcised, Christ shall not profit you. For I testify against.
So if you are circumcised, why would Messiah not profit a person that is circumcised when all the Jews were circumcised? You see, the explanation is not being given. The context was they're trying to receive salvation from circumcision, and it's bringing them into bondage. It's bringing them more into their sin because they have not been forgiven or removed of their sinful nature by their belief. So what they're saying is that we need to be circumcised in order to receive salvation. And he's saying that if you believe that, if you are circumcised for that reason, then the Messiah won't profit you nothing because it's Messiah that's saving you, not circumcision. But let's continue to let him express himself.
To every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to the whole law. Christ is become of none effect to you. Whosoever you are justified by the law, you are fallen from grace. What law told you to be circumcised? For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of the righteousness by faith. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith with worketh by love. I want to read to you a little bit more in this chapter, so you can see the first 6 verses about circumcision. And so what law dealt?
He's saying that the law of Moses teaches you about circumcision. And he's saying that the first 6 verses is about the law, the whole law of Moses, profiting you nothing. But let's continue.
Dealt with circumcision. We can already know that there was a distinction between the law of God and the law of Moses. Nothing in the 10 Commandments says be circumcised. So it must be the law of Moses. But let's go on so I can show more of a clear distinction. Verse 16, this is what it says. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. What does it mean when you walk in the Spirit? I'm sorry, guys. I'm going into it.
That's all good. Keep it going. Keep it going.
Yeah, this is what it says.
Let them cook.
There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ hath made me free from the law of sin and death. For that which the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh. Here's what happens.
Stop reading at verse 3.
Here's what happens when you read, when you are really in the Spirit. That the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. Mm-hmm. So when you are really walking in the Spirit, what's going to happen is the righteousness, and the word righteousness, one of the definitions of it means the right doing. The things that the law says to do that is right, the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us.
Which means
Jesus fulfilled the law.
It's still being
Jesus fulfilled the law, and those who are led by the Holy Spirit, the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in them too, who walk after the flesh.
Now, he said correctly that one of the definitions of that word righteousness here is equitable deed or right doing. So it can be read that the right doing of the law might be fulfilled in us. So he's about to tell you, I'm not sure how this does not apply to part of the law, that it only applies to 10.
Walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. I'll read verse 7, talking about being carnally minded. I'll read in context. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is...
To read fast and lose the context because he's just trying to tell you exactly what he has in his mind he's missing the point of being enabled to keep the whole law. That you can be enabled to keep the whole law, and that if you're carnally minded, you are unable to keep any law, including the 10 Commandments. But this is not the emphasis. The emphasis is not to keep the rest of the commandments besides the 10, which I would say that's not what they do either. They take other laws that's in the law of Moses and keep those as well, but they don't talk about it. That's just because it's contrary to what they're emphasizing right now. You know, to eat clean foods and not eat unclean foods is to ignore the fact that it's written in Leviticus and Deuteronomy 14. You know, to not eat the blood is to ignore the fact that it's written in Leviticus 17. There's so many aspects that this particular denomination abides by, but then they would throw the whole law of Moses in the trash just so they can keep up their church doctrine, which is the 10 Commandments is different from the law of Moses. This is spiritualism. To separate the law from the law doesn't make any sense. But anyway.
Death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace, because the carnal mind is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So if you are a person that says you're filled with the Holy Ghost will not lead you into sin. Sin is the transgression of the law, 1 John 3:4. But if you're led by the Holy Spirit, you will be fulfilling the righteousness of the law. The persons that says we don't need to keep the law, the Bible calls them carnally minded.
So the interesting thing is that he just said you don't need to keep the law of Moses, and then he reads verses that does not make any distinction between the law of Moses and the law of Yah. No distinction at all in these verses. But because of his assumption, he's trying to defend the point of saying that you should keep the law, but that law that you should keep is only 10. But it's not saying that. It's saying the righteous deeds of the law. Every aspect of that law is righteous. And there are some things that are fulfilled, and that's it. So the idea that we are tossing away unfulfilled elements of his law to keep 10 and then nitpick at the rest of it for our own whatever we want to do is silly.
And they're enemies of God. Last verse I'll share so that we can understand it was the law of Moses that was really the issue. That's particularly the things that dealt with circumcision and everything that had to do with reconciliation of sin. Look at what it says. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But the keeping of the commandments of God.
That's it right there, guys. That's it right there, guys. Yeah, that's pretty good.
So he's saying that circumcision is different from the commandments of Yah. Okay, let's see what else he says before I continue.
Yeah, that's a mic drop one right there. Because technically, the commandments of God was a part of the law of Moses, which is the circumcision one. Why would they feel the need to still make that distinction as far as still keeping the commandments of God?
Right. So the point is, there was a ceremonial law. I showed you it. The word ordinance means ceremonies. And let me just say this now. We'll probably come back to it again. But Ephesians chapter 2, you only read verse.
All right. So the yoke and the ordinance, let's look at that a little bit. Circumcision being a yoke, even that idea doesn't even make any sense. But let's look at that, right? I believe circumcision is located in Numbers 12, I think. Let me see. Let's see. So let's look at this. Matter of fact, let's go to the origin of circumcision. Circumcision is located in Genesis chapter 17 before it's even located in the Torah. So if we look at Genesis chapter 17, we see him establishing a covenant with Abraham, right? And he says, uh, specifically, there we go. Look at verse 10. It says, "This is my covenant, which I will keep, which you shall keep, and between me and you, and your seed after you, every man child among you shall be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of his foreskin. It shall be a token of the covenant between me and you." Now watch this, verse 12. "He that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in their generations. He that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of your seed." Now, what's the problem here? You're supposed to be circumcised 8 days old. You're not even conscious of faith at this point in time. So what are they saying is a yoke? Circumcision is a yoke to an 8-day-old child? That yoke of bondage is coming from circumcision? Is that what Paul is talking about? Is he saying this is too much for us to bear? We cannot bear circumcision at 8 days old. Because of the lack of understanding of the law itself, there's so much confusion. Where does it say? Deuteronomy 10:16, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff-necked. Where's that located? In the law of Moses. Deuteronomy 30, verse 6. Yah, your Elohim, will circumcise your heart and the heart of your children, to love Yah, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. This is the law of Moses. You see, this idea that the law of circumcision was a yoke is ridiculous. Let's go to Acts 15 so we can actually see clearly. What is the yoke? Acts 15, verse 1. It says, certain men came down from Judea and they taught the brethren. And they said, except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. They taught that you can't be saved unless you're circumcised. That circumcision saves you. This is why Christ, Messiah, is of none effect, because they are putting salvation on something else other than the Son of Yah. This is what it's saying. This is what they were teaching. This is what Paul was referring to in Galatians 5. The idea that circumcision at 8 days old is a yoke of bondage that their fathers were unable to bear. That doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is that these people were teaching them to try to obtain salvation by their own actions. And that, according to verse 10, why do you tempt Elohim to put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? What were they not able to bear? They were not able to bear the ability to keep the law. Why? The brother in the video read it. Because Romans chapter 8 says it very clearly. Carnal minded is enmity against Elohim. It is not subject to the law of Yah, neither indeed can be. They were unable to keep this law because they were carnally minded. The first thing that they had to address was the carnal mind, not the keeping of the commandments, but the carnal mind. So this is why the yoke was too big, because with the carnal mind, to keep commandments to be saved was impossible. But in the spirit, you are able to see the righteous deeds of the law. Let me see if I could find a translation that kind of said exactly what he said in the video. The righteousness of the law. I keep saying the righteousness of the Torah. One even says ordinance. Look at this. In order that the righteous requirement of the law, meaning what the law says to do, might be fulfilled in us who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. When you walk according to the Spirit, the law can be fulfilled in your life. The requirement of what the law is saying it needs can be accomplished only if you walk according to the Spirit, not according to the flesh. If you are walking according to the flesh, then your carnal mind will prevent you to subject yourself to the law of Yah. Verse 7. But just to show that the law of Yah is interchangeable, which is crazy that we have to even have this conversation, that there's so much built, so much in this doctrine of separating the law of Moses from the law of Yah. I can't even, I don't know if it's so deceptive, because it's causing you not to keep the law. It's dividing the law amongst itself. It doesn't make any sense. How can you divide the law amongst itself? So let's look at the birth of Messiah. Now there's commandments, and I think that it's going to talk about that, right? So it talks about this in Luke 2, verse 22. It talks about the days of her purification according to the law of Moses, right? According to the law of Moses, Mary was supposed to, at the end of a certain purification time, she was supposed to offer a sacrifice. Specifically, there's a different timing. When you have a male child, when you have a female child, you have to come and present an offering before Yah. I believe it was 2 turtle doves, or pigeon. So it says here, when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, was accomplished, they brought him, talking about the Yahushua when he was a baby, to Jerusalem to present him to Yah. And then it says, as it is written in the law of Yah. Now, what was written in the law of Yah? Every male that opens up the womb shall be called holy unto Yah. This is according to the law of Yah, not the law of Moses, right? If they're two different things, the law of Moses and the law of Yah, interchangeable. But let's continue. Every male shall open the womb, shall be called holy before Yah. This is in Exodus chapter 13. But let's continue this. Let's look at the offerings. This is in Leviticus. To offer the sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of Yah. Does it say Moses? No. A pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons. So it's using the law of Yah, or what they refer to as the law of the Lord, and the law of Moses here in just a matter of 3 verses, just debunks their whole view on the separation. Law of Moses, the purification according to the law of Moses is what's mentioned in verse 24, the sacrifices. But let's look at that. Let's see if the law of Moses and the law of the Lord are both saying the same thing. The law of the Lord, according to verse 24, is saying that a pair of 2 turtle doves and young pigeons. But the law of Moses says that there was a purification that needed to be accomplished. Let's see if that's talking about literally the same exact thing. See if we could. Leviticus chapter 12. Let's pull it up. It says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a woman have conceived a seed, born a man child, then shall she be unclean for 7 days, according to the days of the separation. For her infirmity shall she be unclean. In the 8th day, the flesh of the foreskin shall be circumcised. Guess who was circumcised as a child? Was that a yoke? Was that a yoke that Yahushua couldn't bear? Of course, he's 8 days old. But then it says, verse 4, she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no holy thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification be fulfilled. This is what we're seeing in Luke chapter 2. We see her coming to the temple after the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses in Leviticus. And let's see what happens after the days of her purification. Verse 6, when the days of her purifying were fulfilled for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of congregation, unto the priest, who shall offer it before Yah and make an atonement for her. She shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law of her that have borne a male or a female. The law of who? Law of Moses? Yah spake this to Moses. Yah is the one that told Moses this. It is called the law of Moses. Absolutely. Why? Because as we read, the children of Israel did not want to hear the voice of Yah anymore. So only Moses heard the voice of Yah. Therefore, it says, when the days of her purification according to the law of Moses were accomplished, it is the same as what was written in the law of the Lord, or the law of Yah, or what many people refer to as the law of God. Because there's already a teaching. Now, I was a part of this church that these guys are going to. Particularly, we're going to talk about many different videos, but this particular video is done by a couple brothers from a church that I was part of. And because of this brainwashing method of reading a verse, jumping 5 chapters over to another verse, jumping all the way over here to another verse because it says the same word, is a deception. It is keeping your mind in bondage. It is a robotic script that is given to you. You know why I can tell you that? Because I used to give this script pertaining to the separation of the law of Moses and the law of Yah. I used to give this script, and I used to never read the context of which these verses are in. I used to trust the pastors, trust the study guides that all of these guys are reading, and turn my brain off. This is what is going on. They are not free. Their minds are not free to look at the scriptures freely. They are looking at it through a robotic lens, and they are only reverting to the same script that all of their pastors told them. And I know for a fact, because I used to say the same verses and the same things to give the same false conclusions. But praise Yah for his mercy. And I pray that this clears up a lot of the inconsistent views that's being delivered by that particular ministry. So again, I'm not talking about any personal characteristics or character. I'm simply talking about the verses that's being used and the method in which they're delivering the scripture. So it needs to be done in a better way, and it's not being done that way. It's being done with the same speed and the same steering of your thoughts as is done in the churches. So I hope that this is clear. And if anybody who's a part of this group has any questions, please feel free to contact me. Shalom.